Okay, I want to show you an application of XY scatter charts in this activity. The type of activity that we're going to perform in a spreadsheet is called break-even analysis. And within this example, what we're trying to do is decide whether we should make a certain product that we intend to sell or buy it from a third-party vendor. Okay, with this exercise, we're going to develop a spreadsheet to analyze a situation where a manager is trying to decide if they should make or buy products from a third-party vendor that he or she intends to sell. We plan to analyze the cost figures that we're given. We're going to create an XY scatter to show both costs. And we're going to make a decision based on the forecast that we have from perhaps a consultant that we hired to tell us what the forecasted demand would be for our new product that we'd like to launch. Just a little side note of using break-even analysis for make or buy decisions. We'll let FB be equal to the fixed cost for the buy option, FM equal to the fixed cost of the make option, CB equal to the variable cost of the buy option, CM equal to the variable cost of the make. Thus, if we were to calculate total cost for the buy, we would have FB plus the variable cost component CBQ, where Q is the variable, in this case demand, and the total cost for the make would be FM, which would be the fixed cost plus the variable component of the make option. Thus, if we set these two equal, we could solve numerically for the break-even quantity Q, and it is shown in the equation to the right. However, we're going to use a graphical approach to determine this decision. So for the example, a small-scale fast food restaurant is adding salads to their menu. The price to customers will be the same regardless of the decision of making it in-house or buying it from a third party. The fixed costs are estimated to be $12,000 and the variable cost of $1.50 for the variable cost per salad. The pre-assembled salads that we can buy from a third party will be purchased from a local supplier at $2 a salad. The pre-assembled salads will also require additional refrigeration, and those fixed costs will be $2,400. We have an expected demand from a forecast of 25,000 salads per year. The question is, what decision should the manager make? And again, we want to solve this graphically by using Excel, and in particular the XY scatter chart. In terms of the tasks, we're going to develop a spreadsheet to model the total make and total buy cost. We're going to go ahead and create the XY scatter, so it should be very clear which is the less expensive option. And based on these charts, we're going to determine what the best decision is. So let's go ahead and open up the starting file for this activity. To start this activity, I'm going to start with a blank workbook, and I'm going to start documenting all of our properties that we know about the particular problem. For example, all of the make, the fixed and variable cost, and the buy, fixed and variable cost. So I'm going to create a table, and I'm going to go ahead and list the make information. We will have a fixed cost and a variable cost, along with the buy information and its fixed and variable cost. Let's do a little formatting as we enter this data. Let's merge and center the make information. We'll highlight the make and fill this with a perhaps green fill. We'll do a similar thing to the buy information and go ahead and merge and center, and we will go ahead and make this a blue. Let's give this a little bit of formatting in terms of entering some grids or some borders, and go ahead and auto size this so we can see the information. Eventually, these will all be cost, so you can format those now by simply highlighting these cells and applying the accounting format. I recommend doing the same thing here, so apply the accounting format for the cost. The information provided in the problem for the make strategy was that we have a fixed cost of $12,000. We have a variable cost of $1.50. For buying, we have a fixed cost of $2,400. We also have a variable cost of $2. And now we're essentially ready to create a table. Now what I would recommend is to proceed with the assumption that we do not know the forecasted value of demand. So we want to create a table that will allow us to plot this relationship. So what I would recommend is going ahead and creating a table that is demand. In this case, in their equations, just to be consistent, that was labeled as Q. So I'm going to make this in parentheses Q to be consistent. I'm going to format my headings with a fill and bold, and I'm also going to go back here and put the bold text within the labels. We need to model total cost for make, and again the total cost for buy. And based on this variable demand that we're going to enter, we should have a total cost for each option. Let's go ahead and use the format painter, paint those formats across, and let's go ahead, before we put the border on it, let's go ahead and create a table. Now the intent of this table is we might come back with a forecast of, let's say, 20,000, 30,000, some relatively large numbers. What we would like to do, we would not necessarily like to create a table where we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way to 32,000. So what I would recommend doing is creating a table where we start at 0, because there is a possibility of selling 0, and incrementing this by 1, so I'm just going to type out a 1. But then anything after this, I would recommend doubling. So for example, I'm going to write the formula equals the cell above, which would be 1, times 2. So that of course will give us 2. And as we fill this formula down, we will see it quickly goes from 2 to 4, 4 to 8. And if we drag it further down, we see very quickly we're getting to a situation where we have 65,536 units. So of course I don't know where the break-even point will be, so it could be that we have to do some modification. Maybe we didn't go far enough, maybe we went too far. So that decision will be obvious once we model the total cost for the make and buy. I'm going to go ahead and apply the comma formatting and remove the decimal places. And at this point I know the size of my table, so I'm going to apply the grid. And now we can model the total cost for make. So that'll be a formula. And our make information is in green, so we have a total fixed of 12,000. We need to make sure we use the right referencing strategy. In this case, you have to think, I want to fill this formula down. If I fill this formula down, I don't want the reference to the $12,000 to change. So that means at the very least we need to lock rows. But in this case what I often do is just hit F4 and lock everything. That'll be sufficient. So it's going to be the fixed cost plus the variable. The variable will be demand. It could be that 0 people want to buy this new product that we're selling, all the way up to a given number, let's say for example the 65,000. So in terms of filling this formula down, I want this reference to change from 0, and if I fill it down 1, I want it changed to 1. If I want to fill this down again, I want it changed to 2, and so forth. So I don't need to lock rows or columns. Let's go ahead and multiply that by the variable cost per salad, in this case of $1.50. And again, we must think about our referencing strategy, and I want to fill this down, so at the very minimum I need to lock rows, but I'm going to lock everything. Let's go ahead and fill this down. A nice trick will save you time certainly. To fill this down is double clicking this corner point where your mouse cursor becomes a cross. If you do that, Excel is intelligent enough to go ahead and fill that down to the end of the table because it knows the column to the left is actually filled down so far, so it doesn't go past the length of the left column. So we have all of our cost for the make option based on a given variable demand. We want to do the same thing for the total cost to buy, which would be the fixed plus the variable component. And we can fill that formula down just like we did before. The other way of filling this formula down is by manually dragging it, or of course you could copy and paste it through the remaining cells. But I like to use as short as steps as possible, so that double click is pretty convenient. Okay, at this point we're ready to graph this relationship between make or buy given the variable demand. Let's go ahead and click on an empty cell. This will give us a blank canvas, if you will. Let's hit insert. We'll use an XY scatter. In this case, I don't want to show markers, which are the individual points that they're graphing. Let's go ahead and hit the last option. And if we start with a blank, we can right click and go to select data. We can add a series. The series name will be total cost for make. We can hit the tab button on our keyboard to get to the next field. X will be our total demand, 0 through 65,000. Tab again. And for whatever reason, Excel thought it would be a good idea to put this default curly brackets 1, but I have never found a useful reason for doing that. So we're going to delete this and highlight all of our Y values, which is all the make cost. Let's hit OK. We do see a line, which is our total make. Let's go ahead and add another one, another series to this, which would be the total cost for the buy option. Our X's will be the same X, 0 through 65,000. Tab delete. Our Y's will be our cost for the buy. Let's hit OK, and let's hit OK. So now you might want to do some formatting to your graph. If you wanted to be consistent in terms of your coloring scheme, for example, we decided that make would be a green fill, so why not make the make option instead of blue green? So you can click on, with a left click, the line, and then once you have it selected, right click and go to Format Data Series. We can actually choose the marker styles if we wanted to place markers back onto our graph or take them off. In this case, we don't have any. We can change the line color to a solid color. That is our green that we selected. If we wanted, we could actually increase the size of the line itself. Default is 2.25. We could increase this to somewhere, let's say a 5-point font. If you wanted to, you could even give it dashed lines. For the example, I'll choose the dash line for the make just to show you. But I'm going to actually go ahead and change it back to the solid, because what is interesting about this analysis is that we can tell where the make and buy option cross. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and format. While this screen is up, you can change to any other series. Of course, if you hit OK or close, you can always come back, right click on the series you want to modify, and go back to the options. In this case, solid line, and I want to make this the blue. And change the line style to a 5. Let's go ahead and close that. You might want to format this in a way that you're utilizing your real estate a little bit better. What I would recommend is first applying a chart layout, which is up here. These are all the generic chart layouts. I find the first one the most commonly used option. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And I'm going to go ahead and change the chart title to Make or Buy Analysis. The y-axis label will be in terms of total cost, in terms of dollars. My X we can rename to demand. If you'd like to put demand Q, that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and put demand in terms of £sign or units. You might want to change where the legend is. And the only reason I do that is because I actually want to see more of the graph versus half of this space being taken up by the legend. So I'm going to move the legend inside. It's kind of tricky to grab this, but once you do, you can move it inside anywhere you want in the chart. I'm going to put it here for now, and I'm going to extend the size of the chart inside. So this gives me a little bit more room to show the relationship. Okay, you might not want to show decimal points. I'll show you two ways to address that. One way is by default, the charts are defaulted to show the format of your table. So if we were to highlight this and actually take off the decimal points, you'll actually see those decimal points being taken off. If, let's undo this, you wanted to change it manually, where you leave this untouched, you can always right click on the axis, format the axis, go to number, and show 0 decimal places. That way this is, well, essentially the original data is untouched and you're just formatting this axis. We can actually increase the size a little bit. I think that looks good. You might notice the grid lines behind this legend. What I tend to do is highlight that and go to format. I want to fill the legend with a white fill, and I want to fill it, I want to actually put a border around that of black. We can certainly explore the chart layouts. Maybe you want a grid line on the vertical portion. We can certainly add those. We can actually change what we're graphing. We can format the axis and say, well, starting at 0 was okay. The maximum perhaps is fine for now. We could change this to, let's say, 70,000 instead of 80. My major unit, we're going from 0 to 20, 20 to 40, so there's an increment there of 20,000. Maybe we feel that 10 is better suited for our problem. We can certainly change that. And there's some other things we can do. We can display units if you want to trim off the scale option. So instead of saying 10,000, we can actually display this in terms of thousands, which gives us a little bit more room, and it also shows you in the chart demand in terms of thousands. So if we wanted to actually change the major unit, we might even have enough room for 5 every 5,000. So it gives us a little bit more information. So I'm going to leave the chart as it is. I think it looks fairly good, and hit close. Okay, so let's bring this chart near the center of the table so we can do some analysis below it. In terms of our forecast, we were given a value that the expected demand for these salads would be 25,000. So visually it's pretty clear, it's really close in terms of the overlap of the two lines going through this chart of what the better decision is. It's pretty obvious that the green is below the blue, which would insinuate that the make option is actually better. What you could do is you could extend this XY scatter point to put a marker on the line corresponding to your forecasted value. So we could actually create a table called forecast and give it the same fill as the column headings here. We could say forecast. Our forecast value will be 25,000. And the idea is that I'm going to place a marker on one of these lines, one of these positions that is the minimum. So let's go ahead and format this forecast value similar to above. We can actually take this formatting using the format painter. And now we actually have to write a little bit of logic to basically tell us where the marker that I want to place should be. So let's go ahead and generate the forecasted cost for the make and buy. If you want to reference the labels here, go ahead and do so, or you can simply type those out again. But when you can reference, you should. So I'm going to go ahead and give that a similar format. And let's go ahead and reuse the formulas that we implemented here above to the new table that we're creating here. So now we actually have the total cost to make, total cost and buy by reusing the formula. I'm going to auto size these columns. The minimum cost, we can use the min formula of these two values. And I'm going to go ahead and highlight two cells, use the format painter and apply it to two cells. It'll actually do multi-cell formatting. The min out of these is going to be the total make. So again, what we'd like to do is basically put a star along one of these lines based on this forecasted value. So let's go to our chart, right click, select data, add a new series. I'm just going to write, we could write the best decision or the optimal point, if you will. Our X value, we have a single X value, which will be our demand of 25, and our Y will be the minimum between the two. So when we hit OK and OK, the point is going to be somewhere along these lines. So you can actually see when you click the ranges that are constructing this graph. So far we haven't been able to hit on the single point, which is a little frustrating. What you could do sometimes is actually use your arrow keys to cycle through all of the objects in this chart. And when you click on one of these lines, I just clicked one time and it's actually showing us now the forecasted value. So that's a little tricky. You can right click this single point, format this data series. In terms of the marker, I don't want a simple square, so I'm going to use a built-in option. I want to use perhaps this triangle, this diamond I should say, and I really want to make it visible. And maybe 8 will do the trick. I'm going to fill this with a solid color, and I'm going to fill this with black. Now if you look very closely, there's a green fill around this, so we can actually change the marker color to a solid blue. The marker size, as far as the border around it, we could change that too if we wanted. I think it's okay. You'll notice here in the legend there is a green portion of the line. So we can go to line color and say none. So now we just have this single diamond portion in our legend, which corresponds to this best option depending on whether it's a make or buy decision. The value of this is the forecast might change. Let's make it more obvious and say that the forecast came out to be 60,000. The dot, if you will, the diamond will move exactly where we want it. Let's do another example. So the idea is that the best decision will be the minimum between the two lines. So a minimum here at 0 would be a buy option. The buy option will be attractive until it crosses over the break-even point here at around 20, it looks like around 21. And then it'll be the make option, or the green line, for any quantity above the break-even. So just to show you the referencing strategy and the dynamicness of this spreadsheet works, let's pick a forecast value of just 5,000. So now it's no longer on the green line, it's actually on the minimum, which would be blue. You also might want to extend this column width, because I saw before once we had 60, we had picket fences. So you might want to go ahead and extend that just a little bit. But I'm going to go ahead and put the forecast back on the original value of 25 to end this example.